Matrix for hosting us. Location, the pizza, the projector, the lovely Wi-Fi. It's really great.
It is.
Better than Microsoft's probably. So, James will be speaking to us about automated testing and monitoring for your mobile apps. Get it right?
That's it. Yeah, I believe so. I think you came up with the title. I forget.
No,
or I just wrote it as a topic. You're like, that would make a great talk.
No, you made the title.
It did. Automated UI testing and monitoring for your mobile apps, because one topic wasn't enough for you.
I shortened it for Twitter because Twitter's 140 characters.
You always match the picture.
Always, 100%. I like to make sure that you really know, and then I can go.
We don't have a topic set for next month, but we will be meeting on our normal day, which is the second Wednesday. I like this meeting.
Yeah, which would have got canceled anyways because it was, well, is it the second?
Yeah, it would have been next week.
Oh, it would have been next week. It would have been fine. But I was in town, special arrangements, so I appreciate it.
Listen to James' awesome presentation.
Oh, jeez. Thanks. Put me on the spot. Is this on? I don't know if it's actually... Oh, it is. Is it going? We good? Audio in?
Yeah, I hear it.
Woo! Audio in.
I see the dots.
Yeah, I think when Sean emailed me, or I emailed Sean, I was like, hey, I'm coming out to Dallas, and I'd be interested in giving a talk. What do you want me to talk on? He's like, I don't know, give me a few different topics. So I was like, well, I'll do like my normal Android Wear. This will be fun, or just mobile stuff, or Xamarin Forms. And then I posted this topic, because I've been super interested in all of our new products at Xamarin, but also just how to ensure that any developer writing a mobile app in any language can ensure you're releasing your apps with high quality, but then also gaining insights once they're out on the market. So I wrote this topic, which is automated UI testing and monitoring for your mobile apps, which is definitely a long title, but is exactly what we're going to cover today. And when Sean saw it, he was like, yeah, that one. And I said, okay, fine. I guess I got to do this. But I'm super excited because the more and more I use our products I'm going to be talking about today, the more excited I get because it's just really easy to get up and running, and it will actually improve your product, and you'll gain tons of insights into your users on a day-to-day basis. So we're going to cover a whole bunch of stuff. But in general, let's start with me. I live there. It's beautiful. Everyone should move to Seattle. It's great. It's going to be 60 degrees all this week. And I live like somewhere right around here, like right by the Space Needle. And if you're ever in town, feel free to email me, let me know. If you want to come hang out with me, that's cool. Or else I have a Google Doc that has everywhere that you should go in Seattle. Because I think if you come into my city, since it is so wonderful, you should have an amazing time. Now, I mostly moved there for the coffee, which is way more expensive than it is here, and I don't know why. Like even, I'm like, I'll go to like Whole Foods and like $2. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Everything's double. I moved there mostly for the coffee because it is lovely, but I really moved there because I was writing this for years, printer software. That's where I started. That's where I learned all my best practices of abstracting away business logic and engineering databases and writing printer software, and that's great. I like to say that you at least have to have 4 years of printer software, of writing printer software to consider yourself a software developer, just because you love it so much and you're like, I got to go do something else. So at the time, this is before Build and before mobile was kicking off, and I was writing printer software down in Phoenix, and I decided that I needed to change everything I was doing, so I moved to Seattle. So that's me. There's my little journey on my move to Seattle. Now, I've actually been a .NET developer for over 10 years. I found C#. I used to write video games, and once I found C#, I was like, this is it. So I went from video games to printer software. So I've been using .NET C# for over 10 years. I love it. I can't think of writing applications in anything else. And of those 10 years, 4 years have been mobile development. I started as a Windows Phone developer after the first PDC, and that's what really sparked my interest in mobile development. And then it was actually taking that first job where my boss came in the very first day on my job and said, James, we're going to CES in 2 months. We need an iOS, Android, Windows Phone, and Windows Store app to demo. And he said, go. I didn't know anything about Java or Objective-C or Android or iOS. All I knew is I knew C#, and then I found Xamarin. And that's where my love for mobile really sparked. So I was actually a customer at Xamarin before actually joining as a developer evangelist. And over the time, at that company and then after, I've shipped more than 20 applications. I think I've lost count now. I try to find all of them that I've released on the different platforms. And that's on all platforms, including Windows Phone, Windows Store, and then iOS and Android. So that's kind of my experience and why all this experience in actually building and shipping applications, I've realized how important it is more than ever to ensure that your apps are extremely polished and that you're able to gain these insights. So let's take a look at what I love to do the most, which is shipping apps and shipping code. There we go. Go back to the fancy animations. Sometimes Keynote doesn't like to do anything. So I ship lots of apps, but I also ship a lot of code. So one thing you'll notice is everything I do, whether it's a library, an application, it's all open source. So everything that you can see that I'm doing here is going to be live on my GitHub. It's github.com/JamesMontemagno. So anything I talk about, feel free. I have full mobile applications, libraries. I love helping anyone. As in my entire point of my job is you have a question, I probably will write an app or a sample about it, and then I put it on GitHub and I blog about it. So you guys have probably all heard about the Xamarin platform, over and over again, using C#, .NET to build your iOS, Android, and Windows applications and share all your code across all of them. But the newer, when we think of Xamarin, and I think of Xamarin, I really think of it as the complete mobile solution. So what do developers need today to ensure they're delivering the best possible mobile applications? And sure, we could always write applications, but what's the next point, like when we actually go to before we ship them to the stores? Well, that's where the Xamarin Test Cloud comes in, and how we're actually creating automated user interface scripts to ensure that not only our business logic is tested with unit tests, we do the same for our user interface. And we'll talk about all the struggles, and I'm going to do lots of live demos as well. We're actually going to fix a bug in an app that I just shipped, where I found the bug because I wrote a unit test, and I think that's really cool. But then also, once we get into the market and your app's out there, how are you ensuring that you're getting crash reporting and you're getting insights into your application? And that's Xamarin Insights, enabling you to develop and monitor against a single API. So we're going to take a look at that as well. Now, of course, I come and give talks everywhere. You can find tons of videos on Xamarin.com and also on Channel 9. We also have a great interactive learning experience called Xamarin University. It's all live webinars with Xamarin University trainers and instructors, where you actually maybe know nothing about mobile development, become a fully certified Xamarin developer. So that's the entire complete mobile solution. So when you're thinking about how do I create mobile apps, to me that's Xamarin. And we're going to focus right here on these two bits, the Test Cloud and Insights. And specifically, what powers the Test Cloud. So we're only going to actually mention and look at Test Cloud a little bit. We're going to focus on tools that you can use for free that are part of the Xamarin solution, because Test Cloud is just an additional layer on top of it. Okay, so why do we care about testing our applications? Well, it's mostly because we want to ensure a great experience for our users, so why don't we do it? I mean, I wrote enterprise software forever, and I lived in a world where we had different automated tests for our user interface and different tests for our backend, and everyone hated doing it. It's because there was different tools, and the tools weren't good. And there's just so many challenges, but the challenges on mobile are a lot different when we look at application shipping to the store. So the applications themselves are extremely complicated. They're smaller applications, but we still have to integrate with all of the iOS and Android and Windows APIs, different backends. Maybe I'm using Azure Mobile Services. Am I using Parse? Am I using a local database? Then all different third parties. Applications are more complex than ever. We start adding animations and just adding all the complex new layout systems that are coming out with every single version, right? And then you have to worry about, well, what about the memory, CPU, and the scale across? How big does I allow my application to get before it just kind of falls all over itself? So applications themselves are complicated. Now, I remember a time when I got to write code, and then that code wouldn't actually ship in a product for 6 to 12 months. Because it would go under rigorous cycles of testing over and over and over again. And I'd ship it off. It was a very waterfall approach when I first started development. But nowadays, everyone's just used to this little bubble popping up, or hey, you have an update. Right? I remember, in fact, Square Cash, which is a great way of shipping money back and forth between friends. I got an update on my Android phone in the morning, and 12 hours later at night, I had another update. Because something changed, I don't know what it was, but they had to do a whole other release for it. And apps and users are expecting you to update your apps extremely quickly, to add new features and to fix things. So that's a challenge that we have. We don't have a long development cycle, so we need to ensure if we're iterating in 12 hours and shipping, how am I sure that I fixed something but didn't break something else? So that's something really unique in the mobile age. Then also, applications on mobile are completely different. My application that I wrote for printer software was a client server. It was an application that was up on a physical PC for weeks or months at a time. It never closed. these applications are open for seconds, maybe minutes maximum, before they close. So how are you ensuring that you're notifying your users that something is happening in the background, or you're making RESTful service calls? Like, these applications are very short. It's a completely different world of mobile that we live in. And then, of course, the biggest challenge is that star rating. We have to ensure that there's a great high quality, or else you get a few stars. A great point in case, I'm kind of hurt because it is my home team of the Seattle Sounders. I'm a big soccer fan. But they released an update to their app last season, in the middle of the season, and you'd open the Android app and it would just crash. Launch screen would come up, crash. I actually went into their logs, and I found out that there was a bad JSON deserialization of a date timestamp that was happening, and I emailed them. I'm sure no one saw it, but I definitely saw it, and I was like, here you go. And what was interesting is that they were probably testing their application versus a test server, not a production server. And it took them a full week to release and update that app. So how are you sure that when you ship your app, it actually works on all these devices? And you should just see the series of 1 stars. It's hard to recover. Once you go down, it's really hard to get back up. The biggest challenge I think that I've had as a personal just mobile developer is team size. When I started at Canon, we had a 50-man team, and our project was about 3 years to actually get up and running and shipping that product out the door and then maintaining it. So we had 50 devs. Now, if you look at a game like Destiny, which just shipped last year, it took 5 years to create with over 400 people working on it. But in the mobile space, take a game like Angry Birds, which was one of the most successful mobile apps ever created. It was made in 8 months with only 10 developers. So really small team sizes. And in fact, when I started mobile development, for 2 years, I was the only mobile developer creating iOS, Android, Windows Phone, and Windows Store apps, designing, developing, testing, and integrating. And this is the reality of why it's so important to think about how are we testing our apps first, and how do we make that simple for you? Because not everyone has 10 devs. Most of us are just 1 or 2. Look at those fancy animations, too. That's why I like Keynote sometimes. Someone did that for me with the whole animation. I don't know how to do that. And then we look at devices. And devices are crazy. We were just having a talk earlier about just the plethora of different Lumia devices that are released last year. And then more that are released this year with flavors of obviously even 7.5, 8, 8.1, and all the different updates that have come out since then. If you take a look at Android, there's more than 19,000 Android devices in the world. It's a lot of devices. I know I don't have 19,000 devices sitting around to test on. I have like 6. I remember taking a screenshot. I tried to find it. I downloaded my Twitter history to try to find this. But I remember when I first started mobile development, I took a photo of, hey, these are the tests, the devices I'm testing on. It was like 1 Android tablet, like an iPod Touch, and like a Windows Phone, and like that was my test suite. That's what most test suites are today, actually. And even though you might think, well, 19,000 devices in the world, that seems like a lot. What's actually out there? That what are we concerned about? Well, I just shipped an app on Tuesday to Google Play, and I targeted only ARM 7 and x86 devices and Android 4.1 and above. And I still support about 6,000 different devices that have access to Google Play. So it's really interesting. Now, iOS is a little bit interesting because there's about like 20 or so different variations, but now there's more screen sizes, different variations. Now, of course, you intermix all this with wearables, and there's some 20+ different wearable devices, and the Apple Watch is coming out. So it's crazy, right? In fact, to just target and reach the top 75% of devices in the United States, you'd have to have 134 devices. Like, you can't test on all that. How are you ensuring that, right? To hit 90%, it's nearly 300, and that's only in the United States. And like, I just love to show this. This is like all Android devices. And this is just the market share per Android device. I mean, there's so many that it's just dots on there. You can't even see it. So what you're looking at is the 50% of the market is over here. While it may seem important that I definitely tackle the Galaxy S3 because it's the most popular. This is from late last year. Most popular device. There's a huge segment of other devices out there, and then how do you even target all of these, right? So fragmentation is really crazy in the market. And then you think of testing. Like, I told you my test suite, and that's actually pretty close to what most people are doing. Most people only test on 10 devices. That's usually the test suite. Code coverage is supposed to be less than. I forgot to change that. Code coverage, I'll change it, is never more than 20%. There we go, flipped it around there. So code coverage on average, when we surveyed all the top companies, their code coverage of just like unit testing, their application, was under 20% in mobile. And then continuous integration, less than 25% of companies are actually doing continuous integration today. Now, when I was in software development doing enterprise stuff, like that was never the case. Like we were always trying to hit 70, 80%. There's some companies that you can't even ship your application unless you're hitting 100%. So we need to do a better job, and we need the tools as well. So we think of all of testing, like how can we do this before I get into demos? Like how can we actually test our application? So there's a lot of things such as beta testing or manual testing. That's probably what we're doing today. If you think about simplicity, like that's not really simple. I'm going through and I'm tapping buttons and I'm testing my workflows every single time I make a change in code. Really? And it's a long cycle. So every single time we do that, what's my test suite? How am I growing my test suite, right? And then of course unit tests are great. But only testing here with unit testing is just our business logic. We're not necessarily testing anything in the user interface layer because we can't at that point. So really we find the sweet spot is a combination of everything, but really ensuring that you're tackling automated user interface testing as well. So when you think of mobile testing today, we kind of call it the shift left approach, which is that most developers don't think of starting to test until they're ready to ship their application. I know I'm guilty of it for the last 10 years. But when you think about testing, and if you have the tools at the very beginning of your application is when you should start thinking of testing. Then as you start development, it's not that you have to do all of your testing all up front. You can start development, but kind of point when you're about release 1, you should be at a level where you're not doing too much. It's just iterated, just bug fixes. And then you can actually just go ahead and keep your quality model high because you have all your unit tests and UI tests in place, and you're just good. And then every time you add a new feature, you create a new unit test, and you're in parity. And this is just the basics of 101 testing, right? It's not new. It's not necessarily mobile per se, but this is how we should be thinking today. So let's look at the tools of how we get there, because we know what we want. So how do we get there? Well, Xamarin.UITest is a way that we can take C# or Ruby. You can do this in Ruby as well. To create automated UI tests for any of your mobile apps for iOS or Android. Those mobile apps could be written in C#, could be in Objective-C, could be in Java, doesn't matter. The best part is that we can run these tests locally on simulators or devices, and like I said, it can be any application. So this is your tool to be able to automate your user interface. And again, like I said, you can do it either in Ruby or in C# in Android Studio or Visual Studio or Xamarin Studio and Visual Studio as well, coming soon. I think not 100% there. And then we allow you to give you normal things such as tapping, scrolling, multi-finger gestures, GPS, rotation, so things that your users are normally doing on their devices. You can even automate language, currency, network connectivity as well with it. Now, slides and stuff like that are great, but it's just a lot easier to demo it, to be honest, because slides can only show you so much. So when you actually go to Xamarin.com and you dive through the Xamarin.UITest documentation, it's going to start you with this application I'm going to show you, but then I'm going to show you my application. So the sample application is called credit card validation. It's kind of a cool sample of just how you can get up and running really quick. Let's see here. Inside of my project, I have a few things. Let me just go through the actual setup here. I'm going to pull this out if it'll pull out. There we go. So inside of my application, I have my Android application, my iOS application, and then a UI test. Now, the UI test application is actually just an NUnit test. In fact, there's just a package called NUnit that you grab, and then also Xamarin.UITest. So if you've developed like unit tests for your business logic, the entire syntax of asserting and setting up your application are going to look very familiar as well. So the idea, instead of asserting on our business logic, is that we're asserting on the user interface. So for this application, I just have iOS application tests. So what I do is you have a test fixture. So this is my credit card validation test. Let me just first run the application here so we can kind of get an idea of what it looks like. And we'll adjust the screen size here. simulator up. I'm sure it'll be like huge. Oh, it's not too bad. Okay. Make it a little bit. That's good, probably. All right. So the credit card validator is going to do one thing. It's going to validate some credit cards. So there we go. So for instance, I could come in and I could just start typing some numbers. If I hit validate, it'll tell me that it's too short, that I need to actually update it. So let's see how close I can get. I think you need like 16, too long. I could have counted, but boom, it's valid. So it's a very simple use case, but you could imagine that you're writing some application where you have to do first name, last name, enter your credit card information, and you need to validate that. And the idea here is that, yeah, I can validate in the back end that my business logic is working, that I'm validating the credit card and the year and date that's coming down from the user interface, but how do I know that it's actually pushed to a new screen? Or that here, when I push back, that this is valid and nothing's actually done. We can see a bug right here in our code. I push back, and it actually didn't change anything when it was valid. So and that's kind of interesting. So this application is going to do one thing here. And then what we're testing in our user interface is that it's validating correctly for iOS. So let's actually see how we'd actually get up and running with this. So the first thing that we do in our application, if I go ahead and close this down here, is that we have a test fixture. So our test fixture is just a suite of tests that are available to me. And you can do this for iOS or Android. So inside of here, I have my iOS application, and then I have a setup. So this is the very first thing that will get set up when I run any of my tests. And what I'm going to do is, this is the test fixture. So this gets run once when it go ahead and runs any of my tests. Then additionally, there's a setup method here that gets run every single time. So all I'm doing here is I'm pointing it to an IPA file. So when I bundle up and package up my application, this could be in a release or it could be in the debug mode. I'm just going to point to it to say I would like to point at this application. And then we're going to configure the app. So once I have the app, I can actually go ahead and start doing some stuff in it. So let's go ahead and actually write a test. So public void, we'll write DFW test. There we go. So we're going to run test. So when I have a test on top, that just signifies to the NUnit and unit test runner that when I compile this up, it'll find that it's a test, and then I can actually run it and debug through it as well. So what's really cool is that, let's say I want to validate that every single time I tap it, that message is showing up correctly if I have invalid data entry. So at this point, I actually have no idea how to start writing this test because I don't know the UI elements. I don't really know anything. So what I can do is I can just type in app, and then this enables me to interact with the application on the device. So I can actually interact with the device, so I could actually see if it's a phone or a tablet or set the location of latitude or longitude. But really what I'll be doing to create a user interface test script is integrating with the different function calls, such as dragging coordinates, entering text. I can tap, I can pinch to zoom. These are different functions that are available. But one thing that's really cool is the REPL. So it's a read eval print loop. So what that allows me to do is actually run my application, but then actually perform events in real time. So what I can do now is I can go ahead and compile this up. And what we'll see over in my test runner, if I drop down here, let's go ahead and drop this down. There we go. So I have this DFW test that we can see over here that was created. Oops, where'd it go? Somewhere. It's too fast with my, there it is. Oop. There's my unit test, and I have this DFW test. So I'm just going to say run test. So what this will do is it'll automatically run the application, and then it will start this, this test right here for me. So one, that's kind of cool that it just started the application, didn't actually do anything. But then I get this REPL. So this REPL is the way that we as developers get to interact with our application. So up here, I can actually put these side by side. The first thing that I can do is I can type tree. What tree will do for me is it will actually give me all of the controls that are visible on the screen with all of their IDs. The nice thing about UITest and how this is powered is it's not necessarily just by strings or by what's visible or by pixels, like this is at 500 and 800, you know. Everything is ID based, so you can set different properties to actually gain access to it. So for instance here, we can see that I have a few text views and I have a few buttons that I can press, and then I can start querying on them as well. So I could say app dot, and I get live IntelliSense that's actually in here. It's as good as it can get for a actual command line. But what I can do is I can say query, and I can say a dot marked. So what marked does is you can give it an ID, you can give it a string value, and this will query the actual button or actual text field. So what I can say is give me the credit card text field there. And what I can do is actually go ahead and say var text equals. There we go. So we can see that it's found one control on there, and then I can actually, see the results. So if I actually say text. So I've saved text here in a local variable, which is this little data entry field. And then this gives me all the attributes on it as well. So I can see the X and Y, if it's enabled, if it's disabled correctly for me. I can see all the different attributes specific to iOS. So now I could just say app.enter text. And I'll pass in my text, and I'll say, that's not it. Let's see your text. App.enter text. Now in this case, you should be able to pass in the element, or we can actually just go ahead and query it again. Dot marked card text field, yeah. Long ID names, that's always the problem. There we go. So now ideally, we want to go ahead and do not that. There we go. So in the simulator, if you're going to interact with the actual keyboard, you have to tell it to pop up the keyboard so it can press it. So it's kind of a new, interesting iOS 8 thing. But so now I can actually say, enter the text, and it's actually going to come over here and actually enter that text multiple times for me. So I'm actually validating controls. Now what I can do is I can say app dot, could actually tap, and I can query the button. So where's our button? So that's going to be our validate button. So actually click it here. So now at this point in time, I could go ahead and say, let me go ahead and say tree again. And I have all the different elements that are on here because it still has the keyboard on there. But what we're really interested in is ensuring that the error message is there. So here's our error message text field. So now we can say a.app.query. There we go. Copy and paste. That's the way to do it. So now we can go ahead and actually validate this. So I want to ensure that I enter these commands, and then I want to make sure that the text here is actually set correct. So I've kind of actually created my test suite here. I validated that I entered a few digits in here, and then I can do some stuff. So what I'm going to do is say copy. That's going to copy my test over to the actual board. Then I can actually just paste it in here. And what that's going to do is actually have everything marked here. It has some different output commands that are there. And I can actually go ahead and get rid of some of these fields here. But here we can see that it's basically generated the event and the entire test for me just by me doing it. So you can imagine, in normal terms, I'd actually test this application. I'd enter the text. I'd hit tap. I'd hit next. And I'd go ahead and do it, right? But now, instead of just doing it manually, next time I want to run this test, I can just simply run it. So what I'm going to do now here is I'm going to say var results. So I'm going to kind of solve up do my actual assertion here. So this query is going to give me an array back of app results, and those are going to be different elements. So I'm going to say var, let me get my label, that'll be my results, sub-0, and then I can say assert dot r equal, and I'll say label dot text, and we know that we want that to be equal to Go back to our REPL. This right here. Now, this might not be the actual thing. You might want to look for translations or something like that that are being pulled in, but you at least want to see that it's visible, that's there as well. So that'd be another thing as well that you could say, because if this is never visible on the screen, that means it went wrong, and this test is just going to explode when I actually cast that. So another assert that I would do here is say r equal, and I want my results dot length to equal 1. Then you can fill that in. So this is kind of nice because I'm making sure that the element shows up and is actually displaying the correct text as well. So now if I go ahead and run this again, actually take the newly generated test for me, and it'll just handle it all automatically. Let's see here. That is a good question. About to find out. It is typo, boom. And in fact, if you were coming back, in some way, you'd probably actually want to test that. Yeah, that's funny. So there you go. And then you can see over here that the actual test passed. Cool. Yeah, Sean.
How do you deal with web views?
Yeah, so web views, you can actually interact with the HTML and CSS, and there's ways to invoke into that. So let's say you had an OAuth field. You could actually go ahead and select the actual selector and actually enter them. And that's documented as well in the documentation. So there's definitely ways of interacting with a web view. So if you're writing even like a PhoneGap app or something like that, you can interact with all the elements as well on that page. It's pretty cool. So let me show you off, and now let's actually write a test for something a little bit more complex, and I think is really cool. So I wrote this app. I'm just going to go ahead and run it. We're going to fix a bug in it, and then we're going to ship it up to Test Cloud. So what I'm going to do here is actually launch the Android player. So we're going to get rid of the iOS. And I think what's really cool about the Android bits and pieces of it is that it's just an APK file. So you don't even have to have the project sitting around it all. It's and the same thing with iOS. It's just an IPA. So the only reason it's inside of Xamarin Studio today is it's very convenient, obviously, for me to make changes to my project and go back and forth. But it doesn't have to be. It could just be a file sitting around that maybe someone else gave you, and you're like, I need to test this. And what will happen is the Xamarin.UITest and Test Cloud, they're going to re-sign it with a key that allows us to interact with it. And there's an architecture diagram of what's happening. There's just a lot of like little microservers being passed back and forth. But okay, so let me go ahead and launch this application. So I had a challenge of writing a blog post to outline the new Google APIs that are available for Google Maps. They have this light mode, which enables you to basically do a bitmap. So this isn't a full Google map that had to render out and do like touch to zoom or anything like that. What it is just a bitmap of a resolution and area that I want, but I can still do a lot of things in the API, like set coordinates and do flyovers and all this really cool fancy stuff. So I built an app. I started on Monday night. I shipped it to Google Play, and it was published on Tuesday afternoon. Tuesday night around midnight, I would say. But what's really cool is I use Google Places based on a geolocation to say, give me all coffee places. As you see, I'm pretty addicted to coffee. Coffee around me. And this, by default, is set to the actual Xamarin headquarters in San Francisco. So we can actually flip through and see what's open there. So if I come here, we can actually flip through as well and see what's open there with the star rating, which is pretty cool. I've been using it here quite a bit. And then if I actually hold down here, it'll actually go off and actually load Google Maps if you have the app installed, or if, or not. Depends. It should work. And go back here. There we go. So you can kind of navigate to it.
Is that a Google Play feature, or is that just a map?
Which one? The map here, this is a Google Maps feature. It's built into Google Play services.
Did you get that work on your Xamarin Android player?
There's a good way to Google that and figure it out. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
you need Google Play services installed. Correct. There's definitely ways to do that. Not officially supported. Because of course I could have run this on my device and you would have saw the same results. But something that's interesting is I started writing some UI tests for it. And what happened was I found this bug, which was that there was no rating that came back from Google Play or from Google Places. It would still show the star on it. And I didn't actually realize that when I was flipping through. So here's what I did to set up this test. So what I did is I came into my project that looked like this. And I'm thinking like real world, how do I test these applications? So I had my shared code. My shared code is pretty straightforward. I have a view model that goes off, and it uses location services here. I use a plugin called geolocator that I called. It's one call to get the GPS location back, and then I call out to Google Play, the Places API to actually pull down data, deserialize it with service-stack.txt, and then display it in the user interface. So if we look at the UI, though, here, what we'll notice, if I go into my layouts, is that, let me go ahead and put down some of these, is that I have a text view here, which is actually going to show like how far away you are in miles. I also have a star here, a text rating next to it, and then the name at the bottom. So that's kind of my layout. So the map is actually displayed behind a view pager that I'm actually paging through, like an adapter. So I started creating these tests. And inside of here, I created a new NUnit test. And it's going to look very familiar to what I'd had before. So I have a way of actually toggling an iOS and an Android app. I haven't created an iOS app, but I'm going to in the future. So we've created this way of actually setting up both an iOS and an Android app from a single UI test. So what you do is you just specify, if you're on Android or iOS, called platform. And then instead of just saying test, we created a nice overload called test case, which allows you to pass in any argument. And this argument will get passed when your method is called. So it'll pass in the platform, and then it'll configure my test. So if we go down to configure test down here, what it does, it says, hey, am I Android? Then go ahead and set up the APK file right here. And then there's a way to test if I'm doing it against local or if I'm doing it on the test cloud. So I did a few things. Let me just go ahead and run this. Well, let me first talk about architecture. So I'm running this application, and I actually don't want to ping the server every single time. And this is kind of a world that you might live in. You might live in, I need to go to production server, or I might need to go to a real server or a test server. What I said is, I don't want to actually ping places over and over again, because if I run 100 tests on 100 devices, I'm going to run through all my API requests really fast. So what I did is I faked out the data. I said, this is the data that I'm expecting because I've made this call. So what if I just serve that up, but only in the test case scenario? So I created a new UI test build structure here, and that enabled me to put a UI test flag. So let me go ahead and say here. So what I did inside of my shared code is I have a view model, and I say if I'm UI test, do something specific, else don't do something specific. So I have a way inside of my tests here. I have this UI test helper. So what I did is I specified what type of tests am I actually going to execute on, and then I can actually pass that in as an argument when I launch the application. So it's kind of like I have a fake boot up to then put me into a specific test. So I wanted to test no connection, maybe a parse error, no locations, or if the user moved in here, and then I give it friendly names. So I put a little extension method on here. So instead of booting up directly into that little loading animation, what I did is I created a test setup activity. So what this does is it has a list of all my tests. Let me go ahead and drop this down. A little lower resolution. But all I did is I created a little UI test, and every single time I come in here, I can say, load up all my current tests and get the friendly name to display, and then I can tap on a specific item here and then actually start the application. And I can use this enum to actually set specific things in my test. So it's kind of like setup for my test inside of my application. So it's kind of nice. I kind of figured out that's how I wanted to do it. It worked for me. So if I actually go ahead and run this application, let me first uninstall it here. Reinstall it. So if I go ahead and create a new test. So let's go ahead into my test here and actually do something kind of cool. So we're going to go ahead and fill in the no rating. So I created a test called open coffee. So there's coffee open and there's no ratings. So what I'm going to do is just my app.repl again. There we go. And I can come over here, drop down a whole bunch. And this one I should have my no rating. There we go. So we can go ahead and run this test again. So what's cool is this could be running on a device. I just have it specified to run in the simulator, but this will go ahead and install the package from where I told it to, and then we'll actually go ahead and fix this bug. Let's see here. Boom. So this is that first screen, and see I've like kind of tricked it out a little bit to actually go into the application. So let me close the old REPL. Here's a new one. Now, when you are interacting with Google Play Maps, you'll notice that there is no map. Actually, what's happened is it's re-signed my package, so with a different key specifically so we can interact with it. And Google Play Maps, actually, you have to have a specific key. And I just found out this morning how to do that, how to get the key that we've signed it with. So in the actual full run, I'll have it actually in there. But know that you can do it. Just for the demo, it's not there. So let me go ahead and make this a little bit smaller. Boop. Cool. Now I again can say tree. And there's all my different elements. And we see we have my star rating, we have my pager in here. And now I can start typing, and I should be able to say, where is it at? I have touch, I have hold, I can swipe. So I should be able to say swipe left. Let's see if it works or not. So pretty cool. And we can see that it's actually not swiping all the way. There's actually a bug that they fixed in the pre-release package. But it kind of gets a little bit cooler, because what I really want to show is a way to query on the different elements. So what I'm going to say is let's go ahead and find our pager. Let's go ahead and save that out. Var pager. There we go. There we go. So we have my pager. So what we could actually do is we could actually swipe, drag and hold down all the way from the left and to the right. And what I needed to do is I needed to get the actual height and width of the actual device. So now what I can do is I can say, let me go, because we can see that the star rating and everything's over here. So we actually need to swipe over in this test data. So we can say drag coordinates. And what's interesting here is that we can pass it an X and a Y. So I'm actually going to go ahead and come back into my code, because I always forget app.drag coordinates. So it's going to be a from X, from Y, and then 2X and 2Y. That's the only thing I wish that the IntelliSense would come up in there, but one day it'll come up. So we're going to go ahead and drag from our left, so all the way over here, all the way across. So we'll say our pager sub0 dot rect dot x, and we're going to say -5. So we're going to start a little bit inset. Then we'll say pager sub0 dot rect dot y. We'll add 5. And we're going to go ahead and move that from 0 to 0. If I've done it correctly. I did not. Someone didn't correct me. Width. And well, I think actually the Y works. Let's try that. Boom. Cool. So I actually just simulated a complete drag and drop. Now, this isn't based on the simulator. It's based on the physical device. So if I ship this to actual devices, it'll actually be correct, because I'm querying those. So now we can see, now I'm over to where my test data doesn't have this. So I can say tree again. And then I can say app.query. And then I can grab my star in here. Oop. There's my star. And we can see that it's actually visible. So in the real world, I should get no results back. But we actually got one back. So let's go ahead and copy this here into my clipboard. So we're actually going to go ahead and come up here, back to my REPL. Set this up. We're going to get rid of all of our swipes, because we don't need those. We have our pager. That's there. Now we're going to say var results equals app. And then we're going to go ahead and say assert dot r equal, and we want our results dot length to equal 0 in the real world. So we're going to swipe a few times. We're going to get rid of the bad one there. There we go. Now if I go ahead and run this again, this should fail. So let's see it actually run here. If I did the right one. Oh, did it fail? Array out of index. Ah, this is a good point. So I've configured my test, but we have to do something else. We actually have to say wait for element. So the app started up, but you can actually wait for an element to appear on the screen. This is actually really important. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, let me make sure that the pager is actually shown. We can't grab the pager until the pager is on the screen. You can set a default timeout on there as well. But let's actually do something here. We can say app.screenshot, for instance. And you can mark screenshots. You can figure this to pump out screenshots along the way that you could bundle up. So we'd say pager is shown. Here we go. Yes, semicolons. Now we could actually say app.screenshot. And these are going to be important when we ship it up as well. So next coffee shop.
Do the screenshots work outside of Test Cloud?
They do. So when you configure, we should say no stars. So you can configure it down when you set up your application to say enable local screenshots. So that'll actually just put it offline when you do that. Okay, cool. So now let's go ahead and run this test again.
While it's running, can you do the video as well offline?
Not yet, as far as I know. Yeah, the video, I'm not sure how that works. I think it's combining all the screenshots together or doing something else. I'm not really positive what it's doing. The team, it's all hidden behind closed doors somewhere. So here we go. We can see it failed, and that's bad. So let's actually fix it in our code. I'm going to come to my view behind here. And every time I show this, we have a rating. So what I'll do is I'll find my var, my star, and I'll say root.findViewById. And this is my image view. This is going to be my resource.id.star. And I'll say star.visible. The visibility. We'll say if string.is null or white space, my rating. Let's go ahead and make the visibility, where's it at?
Just make it equal to is null or white space? Or not equal?
That should be
True or false, isn't it? Nope.
It's view states. That is odd. Where is it at? Star dot.
Do you need it as view space?
Could be. Let me see. Android dot.
Graphics. I think it's views, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm going to just type it. It's definitely view state dot invisible and visible. It's going to build it and see what happens. See, it's very oh, get rid of that. What is it mad about? View state. It is a view states. Correct. There we go. Be happy, Xamarin Studio. That's what I say. Cool. So this is pretty simple. I find the star. If there's a rating, then show it. If not, don't. All right, so we bundled this up. Now, the key part here is that I don't need to go through an entire publication of my application, but I do need to recreate the package. So just because I built it doesn't mean that I have the APK that I can run against. So all I need to do is say create Android package. And we're just going to assume that it works because we're going to do this here. So we're going to bundle this up, and this is just going to go ahead and put it in a default folder. And this is where I'm telling Xamarin Studio to actually run this against. So let's go ahead and do this here.
Is there not a way to
automate it?
Yeah, automatically do that.
You probably don't want to automatically do it every build because it'll take a long time. That kind of stinks. There might be some flags that you can set to automatically do it, like in your MS build script.
Well, I mean,
but
you don't have to create the APK and get it out of the.
That's how it works. Yeah, well, the APK is not generated for you when you do a build. It's not.
I must have some weird settings.
Yeah. Now it's gone ahead and passed, and we fixed our application, and that's awesome. So that's an instance now where I know. So I built this UI test. I fixed it. I have my new application. And this is important because what happens is I start adding features to this application, or I hand this off to another developer, and they're like, why did James do that? Don't I always want the star to be there? And they don't really realize because I have the worst documentation in my code. So that's why doing this is important, because as we iterate and we start releasing new features, we want to make sure that we don't break stuff. So now if I run all my tests over in my test runner, like this is pretty crazy, because I can just now, before I ship my application, it'll just go here and it'll run all of my tests back to back to back to back. Locally for free. Like you don't have to pay extra for what I'm doing right now. And if you just do this, what's important is I said what? Less than 20% of people actually are writing tests like this, or even just unit tests, or their test coverage is less than 20%. If you write simple overviews of the top use cases for your mobile application, you're doing better than like 80% of companies in the world. You're in the, you're in the top 10% just for doing something as little as this. That's going to ensure great mobile quality in the future. Yep.
With the UI test, can you query like device functionality? Like if I want to simulate taking a picture, or even like Bluetooth.
Yeah. So there's some things that you can do and you can't do. So in this instance, like you could execute code that's going to do something on the Bluetooth or see if it's connected, and you can test your code that way. But you're really going to just do more stuff for the UI. So if your application runs and it's connecting to a Bluetooth device, like you could test that locally on a device. Like I could run this on a device now. It's a little bit more setup. And then you could run it locally. So if you're in that instance where, oh, I want to check it with iBeacons or something like that, and I'm relying on some physical hardware to be there, something you couldn't do, for instance, is I need to validate that sound is coming out. I mean, you could do it locally on a device, but in the test cloud you couldn't, type of thing. Or I need to take a photo. And that's not really, that's more the manual process. Like you're not going to cover 100% of your application with automated testing, but we can get closer, right? So if you can cover most of your application that way.
Like in most of the mobile application development, especially Android, you develop a small screen or standard screen, and then there are so many versions are there. There is no, I don't know what rule they follow. Some are 6 in 6.8, 6.8 like that.
Yep.
So how you can, as a developer, I can make sure it presented properly on each side of the screen?
Yeah, so that's actually the next part of this. So is that device fragmentation, which enables you, we have a product called Xamarin Test Cloud, which are thousands of physical iOS and Android devices, of tablets, phones, anything, that enables you to ship what I just did to run my application and tests on all of those devices in our test cloud to make sure that the tests are running on all the devices, that it's scaling correctly, and what you actually want to do is correct. Sometimes this is just a good visual overview. A great example of this is that for the Xamarin Evolve conference application that I built, I had a little circle image. So I took the face and I cut out a circle of it. Everyone loves circle images. What I found out is that on certain Samsung devices, if it was running 4.3 of Android, it worked perfect. If it was running 4.4 or 5.0, didn't work at all. Because when they upgraded the firmware, they actually broke that. The only way I found that is because I ran it in the test cloud. Because my local device was running an older version, so it was totally fine, right? Yeah, and you can even do things like adjust rotation and a whole bunch of other things. So that's the Xamarin Test Cloud, and this is a paid product. And I can walk you through this, and we can set up this app. What's that? These are real physical devices. I've been in the lab. They're real physical devices, and it's glorious. It's a glorious. It feels like a white coat lab in there. It's awesome.
How does it work?
So,
Cloud?
so these are all set up in our Test Cloud facility in Aarhus, Denmark. So what happens here, and they're all secure servers, so you upload your apps and your tests up to our Test Cloud. We're about to do it here. And then we'll run it, and it'll actually reserve these devices to run your applications on, and they're wiped after every single test run.
So is it like, I don't know, it's a good question or no, but as a startup company, like how much it could cost to get this tested on cloud?
So on the cloud part of sides, I'm not sales. When you go to Xamarin.com/testcloud, there's a whole pricing breakdown, and you just kind of talk to them about it. So there's different plans that they have laid out, but most of it for the Test Cloud is just kind of contact them to see what it does based on your app and your needs. So everyone's different.
Like I'm a software developer, mobile developer, and most of the time I'm working end-to-end from web, and then data from mobile. The main challenge I face that application with the different resolution, HDMI, HDMI, that is create a great impact on users. How it is being presented. Very good looking on the, let's say, Samsung, and then when it goes to some device which is not yet in market, or which is just OEM devices, and this not looking good, or it has become very small and all.
Yeah, so the only way to really do that is have a service like Test Cloud to actually run those on, or else physically buy those devices and actually test on it. Like, that's the only way. I mean, you could try to create as many simulators and emulators as you can, but you're just going to waste tons of time. It doesn't matter. And at some point, you can't test it against all of them, but you can also look at the market share. So like, this is kind of like tackling like when you select it. So, and also we integrate with CI servers as well, so Jenkins, TFS, and TeamCity. So let's take a look at that really quick. And I'll kind of walk you through what we do. So, well, that's me. Let's get a new window up. So let's go to testcloud.xamarin.com. So this is me. I actually have a Test Cloud account. These are all my personal applications. So what's cool is I can start a new test run. And I'm going to select Coffee Filter. That's the app. Now I can select what devices I want. So I can look at availability. I can look at market share that I want. So the top market share devices. What I actually care about is the versions of Android. So I'm like, oh, let me actually just test something, maybe a HTC, Nexus 9. I also want Moto X, and let me test something on an older device, maybe a 4.12. So I don't need to test on everything. I don't need to run it on everything under the world, but I'm going to test it on these 8 devices. Now it'll set me up through different things, so I can have different test series like iOS, Android, a smoke test, et cetera, et cetera. And then I can generate this. And it gives me a little output command that I can actually can use here. But I'm just going to copy this one little token here. So nothing's happened. I just specified that I wanted to do a new test run. So what actually needs to happen is I need to close this, open up the terminal. And I'm going to go over to my documents. This is all laid out in our documentation. It's actually really simple. I mean, I did all these tests in just like a few hours, a few nights ago. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm actually going to go ahead and CD into this folder. Boop. There we go. Now, I have a little script here. And so what I'm actually doing here is I have this Android device ID. So this device ID that I found is actually specifying what devices I want to run on. And the rest of it's just setup and configuration to where to package. And then it actually runs this little mono command line here. So all you really need to worry about is that what I'm going to do, that's all in the document. I literally took the documentation and copied and pasted it in here. Is I'm going to go ahead and say sh test runs. This is going to build the entire application, all my packaging for me. It'll package up my application, package up my tests for me, and ship it to the Test Cloud. Because it has my authentication keys and everything really kind of good to go, which I'll probably have to change now. which is okay because I'm just testing stuff. So this is pretty interesting because this is what your CI server would be running when you're integrating this, whether it's in TeamCity or Jenkins or TFS. It's actually just going to sit here and run this command. It's going to bundle up all of your applications and then ship it to the test cloud. So let's see what happens here. We'll let it bundle up. We can actually take a look at a test run here that I had. So what's really nice is when I dive in, I can see how many tests there were, how many passed, how many failed, my peak memory performance and app size. And then I actually get into the application. So I get a nice overview of how many device minutes were used, so how long were my applications actually running on the devices, what versions had problems. All of them did because they all failed on all the devices because one test failed on everything. And I can see what devices I looked at and then peak memory performance as well. But what's really cool is when I come into my no rating, over here we can see that these are all the different devices, and this is the device Chrome that they put on it, but these are snapshots from the physical devices. And we can actually dive in. We can actually report a problem. We can look at the device log. We can actually, we'll download the device log, look at the console log here, the entire stack trace. So if we ran into an issue, we get the full stack trace. We get a full image. We can get the full size image if we want. There it is, boom, which is pretty cool.
The screenshot from the actual device.
The actual physical device. Yep. So imagine now if you just wanted to actually take screenshots to publish it to the store and you wanted to do different sizes but didn't have them, you could actually just put it here. So yeah, these are the actual physical one. This is the actual device that it was here. There it is. And you can see there's 8 of them available right now in the test cloud. So if you're actually looking to see what you needed to do it on, you could look at all the different devices that are on there as well. So let me go back here. And we could see that at some point, I was flipping through, so we see everything update. And then no stars are visible, and then it fails. And it fails because we want to get rid of that. Let's look back at here. There we go. So what's happened here is it's finished. It's generated my APK. It's uploaded. It's re-signed my APK, and it uploaded all my new scripts. And now it's just going to wait on some devices. So if I actually go back to my coffee filter, it's actually going to wait on devices. And this could take some time. I don't have special high priority, even though I should. So it's actually just going to go and wait for some devices. So we can continue on to the next part of the talk. And then we'll come and check our results later. And we can see it's already in queued. So I'm actually good to go. Cool. So I want to try to do it everything in about an hour, hour and 15. Now, how much time do I have left?
7:33.
You guys good for a little bit? What do you guys think? Cool. So next part I really like to talk about is that we've got testing, but what happens now when I actually release this application into the wild? So we can gain some insights with Xamarin Insights. So what I did there? So that's a brand new product. It's a real-time monitoring solution. So before I get into fun stats, it's a real-time monitoring solution for all of your applications. Windows Phone, Windows Store, Windows WPF applications, Windows Forms applications, Mac, iOS, Android, for everything that's there. What's brilliant is that it's just a single line of code to get native and managed crash reports. When you look at the entire spectrum, if I go back again, when you look at the entire spectrum of testing and analytics and crash analytics software that's out there, there's a lot of solutions, from Google Analytics to Flurry to a whole bunch of different things, but nothing is going to be giving you, if you're writing apps with Xamarin, those managed and native crash reports, because you want your .NET exceptions, but you also want your Android and your iOS application crashes as well. And you want one API, because we're writing all of our code in a portable class library or shared project, so it'd be nice to have one API that just works across all the different spectrums. And it's really important. Whoa, how far back did I go? What's really important that we need to gain these insights is because how often people are using their phones today. It's actually really crazy. On average, people check their phones 40 times a day. 80 to 90% of the time, they're doing this while they're watching TV as well. And 75% of people use it in the bathroom. So now we're not going to gain insights to where our users are using their applications, but this is just saying like we're using applications a lot, and we're downloading a lot of applications as well. And in fact, 190 or so million applications are downloaded each and every single day. And on average, we spend 200 minutes on a phone, and of those 200 minutes, 127 minutes are spent in applications. These are just stats. These are real stats from some agency that gets paid a lot of money to do stuff. But if you think about it, we want to know how much of this time are people in our applications? What sections of the application are they using? How long does it take for an operation to be performed in my application? Because we want the most of these minutes in our application, not in other applications. We want to drive engagement, and we need to ensure that we're creating and getting these insights. Because when I released applications 4 years ago, I had no idea what my users were using. And then I decided that I did need to do some analytics. And what I found, and I did DVR hardware and software, was that of all the sections of my applications, the TV guide was the most used section. So integrating some insights into my application enabled me to see at least page views of my application to say, oh, I need to focus on this section. Because as developers, we think that this other section might be the most important section ever that we need to focus on, or this little thing needs to be pixel perfect or something, but really no one's looking at it. So that's why you need to gain insights so you don't waste time, so you can focus on better features in your application. And that's where Xamarin Insights comes in. Like I said, it's real-time monitoring. It's currently in preview. It's completely free while in preview. And all the crashings, crash reporting will be free as well once it comes out. That's what our FAQ says. Now the analytics part, I'm not sure about on the pricing of that, if they do something with that. But like I said, it works on iOS, Android, Mac, Windows Phone, Windows Store, Windows Desktop, everything. And it's really about reporting, but more. So reporting, like I said, automatically with one line of code will get managed native crashes. Anything that happens, just if your app crashes, you'll get a report automatically. But we can also define those. So every exception, we could log that and get the full stack trace back as well. But it kind of goes a little bit further because it also allows us to track specific events. So just like those page views, we could track button clicks. We could track, if they're in a music application, what songs were they playing? How long did they listen for? So you can actually gain insights to how your users are using your application. I think what's cool if you're in a corporate environment is that you can actually identify your users with specific crashes that are occurring as well. So you can use an email or some other identifier to say this is this user that's of this application. So if you're in a corporate environment, when they log into your service and you've asked for all proper permissions and you told them you're doing this, very important, you should do that, you can actually associate that email address with the crash. Because how often, if you're releasing applications, someone comes up or you get an email that says, this app crashed. But there's no actual stack trace, they don't know what device they're using. When you actually associate a crash with a user, you get the device they're using, you get the analytics on it, and you actually see the events leading up to the crash. It's actually like the repo steps for your crash, which is pretty cool. And of course, we also integrate into popular services so you can get real-time notifications because you don't have time, like Seattle Sounders. It took them a week. So who knows who was checking the application? It might have took them 4 or 5 days just to check the App Store, say, oh, we have a problem. But if they were getting a crash report every single time, they would have got noticed really fast. I'm not sure what they were doing. I'm assuming that maybe they have some stuff in their app. But that's just a real-world example. So let's take a look at that. So I'm actually going to go ahead and boot up. We're going to let that run. It's going. So I'm going to come over to Visual Studio. And I have a different application. Let's go ahead and rearrange this screen here. It's way over here. It's a little off screen. There we go. So I'm going to boot up Visual Studio. I have a little application. It's called My Expenses. It uses Azure Mobile Services to actually pull down expenses and actually pull them into iOS, Android, and Windows Phone. So let me go ahead and pull this up, and then we're going to see how to integrate Xamarin Insights into your application. So here we go. So I'm going to run this both on probably Windows Phone and Android as well, so we can see the different analytics coming in. So let's see this here. I'm going to go ahead and close a few things just because my PC is...
Xamarin developer just need APK or iOS file type, right?
For which part?
That developer, the studio developer,
Mm-hmm.
.NET developer, he just need a mobile app application from the developer to start using it as to start writing tests.
Yeah, exactly. You just an APK. Yeah.
Yeah, in case of like iOS, it's called
IPA file.
IPA.
Yep. Yeah, that's all you need to get started. Yep. So yeah. So let me just go ahead and run this application really quick, just so you guys can get a feel for it once it loads it up here. We're doing a lot. We're asking a lot out of this machine right now. Lots of VMs, lots of emulators going on, and Visual Studio all at the same time.
Does it provide any kind of recommendations also, or just it show that it's up to the developer to identify the test cases and then use his own approach and logic to correct those problems?
Yeah, so I mean, there's multiple things that can occur, right? So it's your application. So you're going to be the one that knows the tests and you're writing the functionality. So you can think of it just kind of like a TDD approach where you kind of know what you want to do, what you want to tap on some screens, navigate somewhere. You want to know how to do that. So you write a test case for it when you're implementing the functionality. If a bug comes in, you could write a test case for that. You could write a unit test for that and then ship it to the test cloud to ensure that you fix the bug now, is it going to be fixed later? So same thing. It's up to you. We have great recommendations and guides on how to get up and running as well. So let's just go ahead and run this over here on Windows Phone real quick. So this is actually going off to Azure Mobile Services, and if we actually look at the expense service here, we can actually see I have this little like data synchronization. The Azure Mobile Service allows you to do push and pop really easily to push and pull data back and forth. So let's see if the emulator will start up. If we're lucky. Again, asking a lot of this machine. Although it still says 5 gigs free of storage, so of RAM. So it's pretty good. There we go. It's going.
What emulator are you using for Android there?
So this is actually a little screen mirroring application called Mobizen. So it's actually a one-to-one screen mirroring application, which is pretty nice. So it allows me to actually deploy onto the actual physical device, which is faster sometimes. You can additionally run the Xamarin Android player on the Mac, and then you could just do an ADB connect to it.
Have you used that a lot?
Yeah, that works well. The debugging sometimes a little bit tricky because you're going through different network stacks and stuff. So it's not ideal, per se, to do it that way. So let's see here. Mobizen? Yeah, I have a blog post on my blog about screen mirroring. If you just do screen mirroring James Montemagno, it'll be the first one that comes up. Most likely. All right, let's see here.
It says connecting to emulator.
Yeah, it's really upsetting me. Let's really upset it by closing it down. That's always the best case. Just upset it even more than it's already upset. So let's just go ahead and run it on Android. Let's try that. Else. All right, let's see here. Okay. So I want to at least show you kind of what it's doing, and then we'll kind of like just artificially create a bunch of exceptions and whatnot. It'll be fun. Let's see. Favorite part of the day is always building and deploying to emulators, I think.
How much time do you think you spend a day when you're developing this point?
Going back and forth, it's like half my time, man. It's like nonstop. I mean, you can't win, really. It's like you have to do it. So the new like emulator makes it, the new Xamarin Android player like makes it really nice, especially just on a Mac, just back and forth. Like it deploys really fast. Here, obviously, there's quite a few bits going on with virtualization and Google Hangouts and devices and a whole bunch of stuff going on. So normally it's not that as bad, like when I'm at home and just going back and forth. But I mean, that's almost the life of a developer. That's why writing like the UI test is actually extremely important. So here's what we're going to do. Is I'm going to switch 100% over to do something else. That'll be the best case scenario. We'll say, sorry VMware, not fast enough. So what we'll do is let's go ahead and add insights into my coffee filter application, since we're already in it as well. So we'll open it up. And to get started with Xamarin Insights, now this is only an Android application, but you can imagine everything I'm going to be writing is in shared code. So if I add an iOS application, it'll be there as well. So let me go ahead and just pull up my my main application. And the first thing that you'll want to add is Xamarin Insights. So I've actually already added the package here, but everything is distributed via NuGet. So when you type in Xamarin Insights, so go out to NuGet, and it'll actually find anything related to Xamarin Insights. And NuGet, always super speedy fast. There it is.
Is there a reason why they're moving more things to the NuGet package manager and away from components?
So the component store also has Xamarin Insights on it as well. They sim ship. It depends. It's really nice when you're doing a full cross-platform library that also if you're putting stuff in a portable class library or Windows Phone projects where the components section doesn't exist, because they're not our project types, to just use a NuGet. So, but a nice thing also is that a component can also reference a NuGet. So it just kind of could be a shell. So it's kind of cool. Either way, it's just a library. The nice thing about the component store is that it has all the documentation, which is really, and samples. So Xamarin Insights here, I've already added into my application. So I actually need to go and actually find this application. So I'll go to insights.xamarin.com. So just like I went to testcloud.xamarin.com, this is insights.xamarin.com, and these are all my applications. So I have different applications that I've had on here, and we can dive through and actually look. This is what all the pretty graphs and charts are. So I can see reports by day. I can see crash sessions per user, so I can see how often is my crashes occurring. And then I can actually dive into a specific crash. So there's very pretty graphs of how often is this specific crash occurring, what version is it affected, and what versions of the devices or operating systems, because we can see this crash is only occurring on iOS. And of course, I can get a full stack trace here as well. We can actually dive through this. So this is an application that I've already wrote. It's been gathering insights as well out there, which is pretty cool. Yeah, so if I actually dive into this exception, I can see how many users are affected, which users are affected, and then actually gather traits on them as well. So I can see that this user's experienced some issues, and in fact, it was 47 minutes ago on here. But I can see all my different users with this specific issue, and I can see as they're navigating through the application. So that's pretty cool. So let's actually add a new application, and we'll say DFW coffee, create. And just with that, just a little create, I get a little API key. And the API key and this one line of code is all I need to actually get up and running. So if I do this here, I actually go back to my list, and we'll see here's DFW coffee created. Now, there's no data yet. So let's put some data in it. So let's go back here. In my main activity, this could be your application startup, what I'm going to do is simply add that one line of code. We're going to get rid of these. There we go. Get a little bit more space on here. And we'll pull in our namespace of Xamarin. We'll pass in this as my context, and that's my initialization string, which is pretty cool. So if I go ahead and run this now, this will bundle it up, and all this will really be doing for me is if I get any crashes in my application, it will actually go ahead and report that back to Insights. So if that's all you wanted to do, add one line of code. It's a tiny little library. That's all you need to do to start getting crashes and reporting back to your application. Not necessarily. It ties directly into each platform's crash reporting system, so it ties in deeply into how Android and how iOS works for when unhandled exceptions are occurring in those platforms. And then what it can do is you have some amount of time when applications crash to actually save state and save things out to disk before they actually completely tear down. So it's not just putting a huge try catch around it, but ish, kind of, to some extent. Except for there is no try catch because we don't catch anything, right? So each operating system gives you a chance, kind of like a final, hey, your application's about to go away forever.
Is it storing it to local storage and then pushing it the next time you run the app?
Yeah, so each application is going to do its best based, like Insights is smart enough, you can read in the documentation how it's specifically working. It's smart enough to know, like, if you give it permission to know about Wi-Fi state and different things and write to disk, it'll try its best to store things around where it possibly can. So obviously you need to store something off to disk or to file to actually get that back later if it's not unable to send it. Because imagine in a world where you're actually disconnected, you don't have internet connectivity, you can't send anything. So the operating system will give it a chance to do that. So let me go ahead and uninstall the old version. Cool. All right. So there's that one line, I don't uninstall the old version, but let's actually do something else in here. So there's different identities and different things. So everything is disableable. So you can disable data transmission, exception catching. You can even do a forced data transmission. So we're going to add that on for demo purposes. So that'll always try to do it no matter what, if it's on cellular or Wi-Fi. We can say identify. And in here, let's just do my name, James.Montemagno at Xamarin.com. And we can do some additional state in here as well. So we could do a dictionary of strings. We could say, you know, I could pass in like age, I'm 28. I could maybe do favorite OS, Android, naturally. And we do that. And you can pass any type of identifier or additional attributions for that user specifically. So let me go ahead and do this again here on the simulator. There we go. So now if I go to my users tab, ideally, there we go. There's me. This is all real time, 5 seconds ago. There's totally me, and all my attributes and traits come back as well. And then it'll try to add more and more data as things are coming up, but it can only do so much in literally 5 seconds. So it'll add different device information based on the device as long as it can query it. Now, additionally, on Android, there's great documentation because there's a whole series of permissions. The only permission that you need is internet. That's the only one. On iOS, there's no permissions under the hood. But you can specify, I could add the ability to get battery information, Wi-Fi state, et cetera, et cetera. So if you give it permission, it'll do its best. It does do a reverse IP lookup, though, optionally, that you can say like where that user's at. And if I didn't specify a username, I would have just come up as a guest. So there is no, additional information. But ideally, in my application, I would have told my users, hey, I'm going to track some information about you. So let's actually crash the app.
When it comes up with guest, it knows that it's the same guest if they come back.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, so you can do it based on, it doesn't do it based on device ID. It does it based on multiple identifying properties that are linked together, or one that's generated automatically by insights. Because you can't grab the UUID of a iOS device, for instance. But it uses unique identifiers to each platform. And then obviously if you're logging in, if I logged in on my iOS device and Android device and I linked it via my email, Insights is smart enough to bundle those together, which is pretty cool. Even though they have different Insights ID, because you gave them a specific ID, it's done that together. So, and you could also do that maybe not based off of email addresses, but based off of some Azure ID that's generated when the user logs in, some token. You know what I mean?
Is there any plans to provide information about usage? So we'll see what devices are being used, what devices. So say in your app's case, your users are mostly using,
Lollipop or something, or the Nexus 6 or something.
Not just what the most crashes.
Correct. Right now, Insights was really focused on monitoring for crashes, but based on feedback and on preview, that's like what it's there for. It's free. Try it, get it. Let us know what your feedback is. That's one thing we've heard more and more of, and that is definitely coming. Yes. So more improvements on the analytics besides just diving into the users. But we wanted to make sure that first there's a world-class crash reporting system in place. But yes, that is coming. Okay, cool. So let's go down to my actual view model where I'm actually getting data. So for instance, here what I'm doing is getting my places, and I have this HTTP client, and I'm doing a bunch of stuff here. Let's just say that I do results equals null, because that's mean of me to do that. Result equals null. That's going to throw a null reference exception. That's something that totally could happen, and all I'm doing is a console.writeLine. But 1,000 other things could have happened right here. For instance, maybe there's a network connectivity issue. Maybe I need to report something back. So now I could do is like Xamarin Insights report. It enables me to pass in an exception and a warning level. So for instance, I could pass in my EX. I could say Xamarin.report severity. That's just a warning. I'm okay with it. Didn't crash the application, but I might catch multiple exceptions, or if it gets down to the bottom exception, I might rethrow and I might want to track that or something like that. So I could actually report that information, but I could also do something like pass additional data into it as well. Every exception in .NET has a data attribute, and I could just say like method. You know, maybe I'm doing my method stamp, and I want to say, hey, you know, what's actually happening here is this is my get places, and just a little string dictionary that's there. Something like that. I could pass that in. So let me go ahead and run this again. And ideally here, like, that's sad. The user said there's no coffee shop around. So my app's at least not crashing. That's good. And we can actually make sure here to make sure that everything's getting hit. Boop. That's pretty cool. Now let's go back to insights. Actually refresh a few times. Go back to issues. We're going to just hope that everything is fast enough to actually report. We'll find out. It's always a how fast is everything going to be today? Maybe fast enough, maybe not. Who knows?
You notice that if you go under users, it'll show you the issue there.
Yeah, sometimes. Normally this isn't going to be how you're using insights, but let's see if we can crash the application too. So let's actually do a throw here. Let's run it again. Let's see what happens. It's always kind of fun to see how fast can everything be. So ideally now this is going to crash. Oh, then I catch it down here too. So that's good. All the try catches. Gotta have them all. Gotta catch them all. You literally do have to catch them all. Oh my goodness, and it still works. Magic. That is magic. Oh, it's not hitting it.
It's going to finally, I guess. It's going to finally.
No, it's not trying.
Is it being called?
Try one more time. Let's see if Insight has some stuff. Not yet.
Are you even throwing the error?
That was a good question. I'm definitely visible, so that's good. I may not even be coming in here.
Yeah, cool. How many references are there?
Let's take a look here. All the debugging. It's real live demo, people. That's what happens. There we go. All right, so let's see. Oh, that's why. That extension method totally works. That's why. My code is so good that it absolutely works. Let's do this. You could. Let's do this, though. Client equals null. Haha. Oh, it hates me. Oh, geez. Whatever. Whatever. You win. You're too good, C#. Let's just do this. Yeah, sure, you could do this. And you can say, hey, my results are null. Cool. Let's try that out. Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is what happens when you change your demo on the fly. No wonder nothing was coming into Insights. Nothing was being reported. All right, let's definitely see this. There we go. Things are happening. It's all happening. Did my application crash? That's bad. Unhandled exception. Everything's going down. This is no good. Boom. It's all dead. It's all gone. It is all gone. So let's see how fast if I launch it again. Let's see if it actually will report it back up. I just want to crash. There we go. Boom! Totally happened. Woo, James, you did it. Good for me. I did it. Look at that. So now we can see that it's Android KitKat that actually crashed. It's associated with me because I'm identified in, and I get all these great things of how many times I've started, the method that I was in, and the entire stack trace available to me as well. All with like 2 lines of code. Then I could go ahead and actually identify and track different things. I'm coming into places, I'm doing this different thing. That's all available there for me as well. And that's pretty cool. So combining not only just the test, but actually coming in and actually using Xamarin Insights to do crash reporting like this, you can actually tie it in directly into your entire cycle, from development to testing to actually deployment. So if we actually come over to the DFW Coffee, one thing that we could do is we could actually integrate that into other applications, such as GitHub, Slack, notifications as well. So one thing that I do in all my notifications by default is I get a notification email that's here. So all my applications, you just get an email every time there's a crash or a warning. You can toggle that. I also come in and I connect usually to GitHub, because that's where I have my applications. You just give it an auth token that you generate, your username and repository, and it'll create a new issue for you automatically, which is pretty awesome. There's other integrations into Visual Studio Online, Jira, Campfire, a whole bunch of other great services. And everything's team-based. Test Cloud and Insights are all team-based. You generate and pull up your team. So if I wanted to add someone in here, let's say like Joseph at Xamarin.com. Joseph Hill's our co-founder and Director of Developer Relations, and tester now. Now he's a collaborator, and I can revoke or transfer ownership over. So you can see all the test results that are coming in as well, which are pretty cool. Cool. Yep.
Do you know or have any idea what the pricing model is going to be for all that?
So all the crash reporting will be free. As far as my knowledge in our FAQ, the analytics and all the other things, I'm not positive. We haven't specified that out yet because it's still in preview. No. Cool. So, kind of the entire thing is that mobile quality really matters. And there's things that we can handle. I started as a desktop developer, and it's definitely not what mobile development is all about today. Mobile development is about these short, quick cycles, great things. Things can't crash. Your users aren't okay with applications crashing. So don't be okay with it. We still need to be able to iterate quickly, which is why creating these test suites and test cases of not only our business logic, but the UI logic is super important. And really, don't let your users be your beta testers. That's kind of what we're doing today sometimes, it feels like. You get an update, and they'll figure it out. They'll find it. And that's just not going to get you great App Store reviews. I use Insights not only just for crash reporting, but also to improve my applications, which I think is the win-win. You get notified when something's going wrong, but also how to improve it and where should you be improving in your application. Xamarin.com/insights or /test cloud is where you can get started at to find information. And of course, you can find me anywhere. And thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions at all?
Pretty good.
Cool. Hour and a half, not bad. On time-ish, yeah.